Have you ever had games where your team was in a huge advantage and yet somehow toward the very end, the opposing team finds a weakness and ends up winning the game? That's because your team perhaps lacks formation and positioning. And so therefore, let's get straight into today's topic, which is your formation is key to winning in Overwatch 2. If you want to see more Overwatch guides, learn more about Overwatch, upcoming shooters and more, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave your comments down below. So your formation is integral. And why is your formation integral? Well, much like any other sport, whether it be football or soccer in your respective country, hockey, whatever the case may be, there is always a team formation that is coordinated and discussed before the game begins. Now, of course, in solo queue, this is going to be a little bit tough, but as you, the player, you need to understand where to position yourself to ensure that you don't get exploited. Formation is imperative because in Overwatch 2, being a team game of 5v5, there are always going to be instances where your team formation has a crack and an exploit, and the opposing team finds that crack and exploit and takes care of it with ease. So what you need to do to exploit their team is to find their weakness. Oftentimes it can be in a player, for example, where the opposing team has a very strong player on their team, and you need to find ways to eliminate that target to therefore open the team up and get the advantage. Another case could be that the opposing team is very strong in their defense and they have very little cracks to exploit. But this is where you need to start adapting to their gameplay. And this is where I feel a lot of players tend to fall apart, where they don't want to adapt. They stick to a certain strategy or game plan, they stick to their certain role, and they don't implement something new to find new ways to earn the advantage. So hopefully this video will give you some insight as to how to properly formulate a better strategy to earn your formation and win more games. So let's get straight to it. Knowing your role is one of the most important aspects of Overwatch 2, since your role can likely determine the outcome of every single game you play. Now we know that we have a tank role, support role, and DPS role, but of course that goes even deeper because within those roles you have characters, and those characters also play different roles. So for example, you have the likes of a Genji, who's more of a flanker. He wants to be interrupting the enemy backline and getting picks off when necessary, versus someone like Mei, who's more of an anchor. She wants to be closer to the tank, therefore helping supporting the backline of her own team, to therefore provide a more defensive utility. Now, granted, Mei can play offensively when she has to, but the point is that every respective role is going to have different mechanics and different responsibilities. And so it's important to commit to a role and knowing what that role can do for you and your team. Not knowing this can in fact hinder and cripple your growth, because for a player to flip-flop between different roles, whether it be a support role or tank role, it's really noticeable at times when you see players who jump into different roles but not understand them completely. And that's because inconsistency becomes your primary enemy, more so than anything else. And consistency is key to winning more games alongside your formation. So when you are choosing characters, when you are choosing a role, make sure that you are choosing a role that A, you are comfortable with, but 2, choosing characters that are going to help to provide sustainability and consistency among your team composition. Because again, this all goes right back to your overall formation and position, since every position that you play is going to have its own respective responsibility. So if you are more of a defensive character, like Mei, for example, you want to be playing closer to your tank to therefore get more results, more value, versus let's say you're a tracer, where you can go off on your own, flank, get off the right picks, and then come back to your team when necessary. These are all things to consider and tick off in your mind, as these can help you to perform better. This can also help you to better understand the overall logistics and overall mechanics of what your roles can do. Overwatch 2 is a game where there's a lot going on, there's a lot of complexities involved, a lot of variables to consider. But that's what makes the game fun. And so when it comes to the game of just performance, you want to ensure that your role is as intended. Picking your role and sticking to it will likely yield better results long term versus you flip-flopping between a tank or support or DPS. If you are going to commit to a role, let's say again, for example, DPS, then stick to that particular role for most of your time. Now, you can always swap between characters within that role because, of course, you want to test the waters and get to see which character or characters you are most familiar with. But don't go out of that role. Don't go from DPS to support. Don't go from support to DPS, or don't go from DPS to tank, because each of those roles will likely have different responsibilities, and the gameplay that you have in relation to these respective roles is going to vastly differ. So, all that being said, let's just jump into more of an in-depth analysis with a VOD analysis, and I'll show you just why VODs are important as well to help you in your growth down the road. So knowing your role is critical in this game, and sticking to that role is even more important. A lot of players, when they tend to lose, they tend to go off of their respective role and end up creating even more bad habits. I understand that losing can be a tough ordeal to handle, but if you are on a team where you are playing in a formation that is strong and you're still losing, the best thing for you to do is to just stick to your role, commit to it, and just go through to the very end. Right here, we can see that there is an escort payload right now, and my team is right here. And look at the formation here. You've got two healers at the top of the building, and to the left, gonna go to the right. I'm right here alongside Torbjorn and Ramatra, and we're both basically protecting the tank while ensuring that both the healers have their own respective space to therefore take out the enemy. So let's watch this really quickly from a top bird's eye view here. So you can see that I'm constantly allowing my tank to play their role. I pick off a tracer here who tried to get greedy, and I reposition. So right here I block off any potential threat. Now that was actually somewhat of a misplay there. I blocked off healing for my Ramatra here. But you can see that I'm always trying to play close to my tank. And my role as Mei is to slow down the enemy team as much as possible and prevent them from pushing the cart. So again, look at the formation. You've got Kiriko at the top, and you've got Anna still behind Ramatra. I block off the tank. He got no value there, so Doomfist is basically dead, right? So now the team has to reset. Again, take a look at the formation. You've got 3 people in the front, you've got 2 in the back. Just like you're playing a sport, you want to make sure that you have the right angles and positioning to ensure that your team can always restrict your victory. So I throw my Blizzard here. I get 1 pick. Now, that was also a pretty good pick there because Echo can be annoying. But of course, any good pick is still a good pick nevertheless. So here, I'm trying my best to force the Cassidy to go back because Cassidy was a threat in the previous round. And so knowing the enemy and their weakness, or in this case, knowing their strengths, you want to try and exploit that as much as possible. Now we've forced him off of Doomfist. You block him off so he can't get any heals. And again, we're right back to protecting the tank. And therefore Anna is getting her heals. Kiriko is still very much doing her thing here at the top, right? And you can see here that we're taking our angles, right? So I go in the front here. Now Mei can't afford to go in the front because she has a lot of HP. she can easily self-sustain. So I'm taking the front line here to see where everyone's angle is. I block off the ult. And block off the ult. We go for a quick ult here with Kiriko. And now we have a quick advantage moving in. We scare them off. I go forward here to try and 1v1 the Ana. Now, of course, I just wanted to do that to stall. So here we go, right back. So I go for a freeze here. I try to block off the Zarya. We got a good pick here. Zarya is dead. Echo's over here to the left, but that's not a big deal. I'm trying to block off the line of sight from the Widowmaker all the way at the back. Echo's still at the front. She can't get any value here. She's not flying, which is not a good thing. So now she copies me. She puts a wall up. Doesn't really matter. I block them off. Ramontra goes for his Q here. So she drops her ult, but it was a little bit too far, so that was good for us anyway. So look at our positioning, right? So me, Ramontra, and the Torbjorn are all in together. Now I run back. I run back to help out my healers here, but everyone is in good position. Everyone has pretty much remained consistent. No one's changed their roles here, and that's about it. So really, at the end of the day, your formation can really win you more games as long as you're able to communicate with your teammates as to what's going on around you, and you're able to really create enough space for your healers to heal and for your tank to do whatever they need to do, while you can be either the anchor of the team or you can be the flanker. In my case, I prefer more of the anchor point, since I want to be there to also help sustain the backline, that being the supports, but also giving more advantage to the tank, so that way the tank can create more space for me to freeze and therefore wall off potential threats. So hopefully that's given you some insight as to how to properly consider and analyze your VODs, because your VODs really do give you a really good idea of whether or not you played poorly in your formation or you played poorly in your positioning, and therefore the enemy team was able to exploit that and therefore take advantage of the situation. So that being said, let's move on to the last part of the video. So learning to adapt in Overwatch 2 is perhaps just as paramount as your formation, because there are going to be days where you just don't have everything together. And that could go for any respective role, whether it be tank, support, or DPS, or even your ranking, whether you're in the medal ranks or your top 500. There are just going to be days where nothing works for you, and you have the choice of whether or not you allow that day to dictate the rest of your performance, or you learn to adapt. And learning to adapt and having the right attitude and mentality is, I would say, just as important, if not the most important aspect when it comes to growing and improving in Overwatch 2, because it's your mindset that really sets you the tone for how you perform in the game. So if you know you're having a bad day, get off, take a break, maybe play some quick play for a little while, then come back. But don't just allow your emotions to dictate the flow of your performance, because that can trickle into your overall team performance, which can then result in bad team morale and thus just create a bad experience for everyone else. And we don't want that. So learning to adapt to every given scenario that's thrown at you can really help you to secure victories a lot more consistently. And this ties well into just your character role and your overall positioning, because with the right mentality, you'll likely have a higher level of focus going into each game, and thus performing better, because you'll know where to place yourself on the map. You'll know just how to, let's say, deal with flankers on your team as the anchor. You'll know how to flank better. You know, there is so many different things you can really truly improve upon when you have the right mindset and learning to adapt. There are going to be so many different complexities and variables to really consider, and break down in your mind. But that's the fun aspect of Overwatch 2, where those complexities can be simplified just by, again, having the right mindset and asking yourself, what was I doing wrong? Was I playing bad because of my teammates, or was it because of me? A lot of the times it can really come down to perhaps yourself. Maybe you just had the wrong attitude. Maybe you're out of position for too long. Minute details really do make up for a lot in this game. And rather than projecting your emotions towards your respective teammates, which can then ruin the experience for everybody, turn that into yourself. Go within yourself and find out reasonings as to why you perform bad, because there can always be ways to improve and adapt new philosophies, new ways of playing the game. And learning to adapt consistently can really help you to apply a better structure when it comes to your performance. Maybe you just didn't have, let's say, the right day for performance because you picked the wrong character. Maybe the role you played as a DPS, maybe you thought you'd be cracked with a Genji, but perhaps maybe in the end you're much better off playing with a Cassidy, because the other enemy team, they had flying characters like Echo or Pharah, and you were too stubborn to go off, and because of your stubbornness, you created a disadvantage for your team. So just knowing that you are the saving grace for your team can really help you to become a better player. And so hopefully this video has given you some insight as to how you can improve and win more games, not only through your formation, but also through the right mentality, the right attitude, and just being overall a good person. So thank you for tuning in. Look forward to the next video. I'll see you in the next one. Take care and peace out.